but you get the agreement in quickly, and it goes from there. Sorry.
Thanks for the question, Suzanne. So 1, 10, and then 9.
Hello, my name is Karen. This question came up yesterday when we had the 4 mayors in front of us in our chat afterwards. And it's, what was the main turning point of the devolvement of powers from local government to central government? When was it swayed?
100
Back
years
or
ago.
forward?
1922. I mean,
Yeah.
in very simple terms, after the period of 1916, the War of Independence, Civil War, etc., the first Free State government, perhaps understandably, put a value on stability as they saw it, and that for them that meant centralisation. So they abolished a lot of local authorities, they centralised powers, they gave central government the power which still exists today to dissolve local authorities and bring in a commissioner in place, which Breed referred to if they don't agree a budget. So I'd love nothing more than to talk for an hour on this, but literally it is since the foundation of the state and has been continuing along that centralised road ever since, unfortunately.
Thanks for the question, Karen. Table 10 and then 9.
Hi, Madeleine here. This question was put to the international mayors yesterday from our table, but I think it might be useful to hear from you on this, because we had some discussions at our table yesterday around the different structures, but also there's quite different populations in those, like we were hearing from Paris and Boston and Manchester in particular yesterday, but we were wondering sort of how does a small population centre, for example, a particular structure might fit there, but not fit where there's a larger population, or, for example, the London structures might not suit here because London is such a big city. I'm wondering what your opinions are on that, whether there is a correlation between the structures and population, or whether that matters at all. I suppose that's my question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd have to
Got a mixed hand there.
Yeah. I think it's a good question, Madeleine, and there's no, like so many things, there's no straightforward answer. In local government literature and across every country, there's an ongoing debate on these issues in terms of size and structures. And I think personally, we're a little bit obsessed with that debate about structure and form, and it's something I'm guilty of as well. But you know, within local government, some of the literature talks about uses architectural terminology, form over function or function over form. And it was a point I was trying to make in the answers to weekend 1, that in my view, all of the models that have been discussed and will be discussed with Sean are workable, but none of them will work without a change of mindset from central government. So yes, of course, the structure is important. It's in your terms of reference, so it has to be in there. But I think it is not the main issue in a way. The bigger issue is that change of mindset. We keep coming back to the terms about powers, devolution, etc. So I think the functions to some extent are more important than the form, and we can get bogged down. You could design a model that looks exceptionally good in terms of its structure, but again, it's meaningless unless central government buys into that and allocates powers and functions appropriately. Because I presume where we're heading to some extent, and Derek alluded to it, is if you go for a regional Dublin directly elected mayor, what is underneath? Are you looking at retaining the 4 local authorities? Are you looking at potentially getting rid of the 4 but having that more municipal tier underneath? But it's my viewpoint, and again, sorry for steering into opinions, but I think the structure will facilitate whatever powers are put in place. So I think the functions are more important than the form, personally.
Yeah, and don't get hung up on population, I think would be on the size. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair point. I mean, size can be, sort of the wrong avenue to go down. I think if you, it's the functions and then sort of simple institutional design principles, and then things will flow from that.
Thanks, Madeline. So just to follow up on that on that question, we have got some feedback that you would like some organisational charts just to represent the various models. So we're going to work on that between now and the next session. We'll obviously get out maybe the next week or so, but that is one of our takeaways. So you can consider that. But the point is taken as well from A that it's function over form, I think is what you were articulating there. Okay, so we're going to go to table 9, then 11, then there's two questions I question, table 2, and then 7. So table 9, Paul.
Hi, yeah, Paul. Thank you for your response, Jim, actually to both Luke and Suzanne's question was very generous, and you said that our remit is very wide-ranging and we can make suggestions on so many different things in relation to how this whole thing eventually manifests. So I'm just wondering, does that include how the vote is conducted? So, for instance, whether it's, PR, whether it's single transferable, whether it's first past the post, can we make suggestions on that also? And actually something else, which I don't know whether I should mention it, but the first session we had last month, I checked online and loads of our prominent bookmakers in the country have odds for the next general election. And I checked them last night, and whoever was top of that list last time I checked a month ago, their odds have shortened. And that's the nature of betting. Whoever the favourite is, people tend to get in behind the favourite, and the odds get shorter and shorter. So also that, for instance, could we suggest that with a DEM that it wouldn't be allowed to be betted on, etc. But just in general, how the vote is conducted, as I said, with the different systems that we have.
Yeah, I don't gamble, so I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of the industry, so I can't comment on that. But I just, it's.
May I make a comment on that?
You can.
If you don't mind.
Just before you do talk to it, just for me to go back on just some of my notes from my opening remarks when we first met as an assembly. So. And I referenced this again yesterday morning. So our guiding references is our terms of reference. And if we do our work properly, at the end of the process, we should be in a position to build a consensus around your recommendations, whatever you propose. While there may not be a unanimous agreement on the type of direct elected mayor and local government structures that are best suited for Dublin, all members should be able to agree that the debate was conducted in a respectful environment and that they were given every opportunity to voice their opinion and that the process was scrupulously fair. So, as I said last night in our social gathering, that I think this is the easy bit. The hard bit now comes when you begin to articulate some of those points you made there, Paul, that I think that there should be the following. And do we have a consensus around that? And somebody might have a counter-argument and say, no, what you proposed there is actually, I don't agree with it. And then we go to a vote. That's when it gets really interesting because there are so many diverse views, and that's the strength of this group. There are so many diverse views. So it is open. You have a blank canvas, but you need to all agree that that's the direction of travel, and these are the recommendations that you have proposed as an assembly. I was given an opportunity to voice my opinion, and it was scrupulously fair. And the work that's produced represents this assembly. So it's in your gift to do that. Dr. Quinn.
No, it was just a sideline remark, if you don't mind, Chairperson, on the betting issue. There's a whole, and I'm not, you don't need to send me to Gamblers Anonymous, but there's a whole world of arbitrage, sports arbitrage and politics arbitrage, where people invest on both sides of the argument. So they put on money that in the American election that Trump was going to win, and then maybe in the bookies and online they put on a bet that Trump wasn't going to win, and they were guaranteed the difference between the two. So it's a big industry. I can tell you that there's a huge number of people that have already invested in Hillary Clinton going to be the next president of the US, and another large investment in Trump going to be re-elected as president as well. So this whole question of arbitrage is going on all the time. The British local elections, there was arbitrage going on, Eurovision, so on. It's not linked to democracy, but there are people making money out of it.
Just on Paul's question about the type of voting, obviously, if the Assembly members want to recommend how the vote is taken, I think we could probably have to do a session on different types of voting. Not everyone is going to be familiar with first past the post, the list system, and PRS-TV, etc., etc. So if this is a thing, you might let us know as early as possible, and we would build that in. We would do a session on different voting types, because this is the key to everything. This country loves PRS-TV. There's been referendums in the past to change it, which all failed, because we do have a fondness for it as a society. It would have would make a huge difference to the result, I suspect, if we went to first past the post like they do in some of our neighbouring countries as well. So this is the first time this has arisen, and it's a really interesting point. But if it's a thing that somebody wants to do a session on different types of voting system, we're very happy to facilitate that.
I might just ask the steering group, if you could, the members of the steering group who represent the Assembly members, to discuss that amongst the Assembly, and then come back to the chair, to myself or to Art, on that point. Thank you. Thanks for that question, Paul. Now, so we have table 11, then back to 9, 2 questions from 2, and then table 7. Thank you.
Francis, I'm just wondering, what do you think would encourage central government to devolve functions and budget?
A very strong report from the Assembly.
Yeah. And public reminders when they come to your doorstep that one of the big issues is give local government power and funding. When the local government fund was set up originally, it was supposed to be ring-fenced, inflation-proofed, and so on. And I used, in some international thing, I say it was an example of a good local government fund. And gradually, each of the 4 features that made it a good idea has been whittled away, isn't that? Yeah.
Thanks, Francis. Very good takeaway from Professor O'Brien's comment. A very strong report. Again, that's in your hands. Table 9 now, please.
Hi, John here. Just, I suppose, one thing that came up in the comments earlier was how to ensure parity, and that's something in Manchester as well, so that because the city is has a larger population, is such a dominant element within the Dublin region, how to ensure parity so that the city doesn't dominate the decision making of the Dublin mayor. And I know, and I think A had said this, that the 2014 proposals for the mayor were more or less deliberately set up to fail, because they required each council to vote for them, to vote for the principle of a plebiscite, and it was pretty much known that Fingal wouldn't vote for it in advance, so it was set up to fail. But notwithstanding that, there is a need to ensure parity and to build buy-in and support across the Dublin region. And I'm just wondering how the panel think that might be done. And I'd throw out 2 quick ideas, and if you can answer these without straying into advocacy too far, then that would be great. If the cabinet was to include, or if the mayor had a cabinet that included elected members or the chairperson of each of the 4 councils, would that be helpful? Would that help to build support and collaboration within the region and support for the mayor? And maybe more controversially, what would you think of the idea of holding a plebiscite with a qualified majority, where 50% was required in each council area? Thanks very much.
Maybe I'll come in here. A has offered a couch in case I need political asylum in Cork. I suppose the first thing I'd say is I'm not sure the focus on the existing local authorities is, it presupposes a certain decision, and I think that's up for you to make. I think the focus should be on the citizens of Dublin, wherever they are, whatever administrative structure they're currently living under. It's their rights as the citizens of Dublin that's paramount. I think the second question, in terms of maybe buy-in and that idea of the mayors of the existing four, I think we sort of briefly discussed this earlier. I think you get a very odd situation where you have somebody who's directly accountable to the people of Dublin, who finds himself accountable to people who are not directly elected, even by the people of their own local authority, which I think is, they may be indirectly elected by the councillors. And I think that would be, I think a design principle that might be worth thinking about is that idea of a directly elected mayor. If you want to have a regional structure, then that regional structure probably should be directly elected as well. And that directly elected mayor is responsible to a directly elected tier that represents the people of Dublin rather than local authorities. I think the parity thing, I think that might be, I'm not sure it's a helpful avenue to go down. The idea that, all four are equal or not, I mean, I think if one thing we've seen, they're largely recent constructs. I don't think people see themselves as citizens of Fingal or citizens of Dún Laoghaire or citizens of South Dublin. I think the mayors were quite clear about that. But I think that's something for you to tease through how that might be done in terms of building confidence. I mean, maybe it is the plebiscite that actually builds confidence. But I'm not sure it would be a plebiscite of the people of Dublin. I'm not sure you'd have an intermediary vote. So is that couch still there? Yeah.
No.
And what about the qualified majority?
Okay, thank you. So on to table 2. Now, I don't know who was first past the post, so I have to call in the VAR or Hawkeye. Who'd like to go first? Evian.
Hiya, my name's Evie. There's a lot of talk the first weekend, going back to functions, of health and education being a devolved function. But I just noticed yesterday when the Lord Mayors were talking, none of them seemed to want that function to be devolved down to local government or think that it was possible or even worth considering. So I just was wondering your opinions on that. Are those two things that we should be devolving, or are they too complex for that?
Personally, I would devolve, and I think health was a major function of the local authorities until the 1970s when the health boards were created, and obviously since then we moved on to a different model again. I think what the mayors were kind of alluding to was the idea that we may not get everything initially. So I think they were kind of highlighting maybe 3 or 4 kind of big ticket items initially for devolution that they saw as very important, and I think they kind of focused on housing, transportation and climate action. But I don't think they were deliberately necessarily excluding other things. I think they were just saying these are kind of 3 big ticket items that we might start with in terms of devolution. But I'm a localist. I would like as much as possible to come down.
I think the other practical thing, it is worth noting that actually education, there's parts of the education are devolved to the Education and Training Board, the old VECs. So I sort of went to higher education in a municipal education system. You know, the DIT was run by the City of Dublin VEC, which was ran by the councillors of Dublin. So that system runs in parallel to the existing local government system. So we do devolve, we just do it in a very particular way. And it's a small part of the broader education system.
And also the way it is devolved, the new education and training boards are not done on a county by county basis. So for example, my nearest one is Limerick and Clare ETB, and then some of the others are combinations of counties and some aren't. So it's not as straightforward.
Just want to explain what ETB is, just for people might understand it.
Education and Training Board. Formerly, they were VECs, Vocational Education Committees, but they're now Education and Training Boards.
Thank you.
Yes, more for the alphabet soup.
Thanks, Frida. We have 3 minutes left. A question from table 2, then 7, and that'll be it. Thank you.
Thank you. One more clarification came up last week in relation, or the last session, in relation to whether there's any members of central government coming to talk to the Assembly. And the second one's just in relation, is there any examples in relation to councils rejecting the CEO nomination?
Yep, I can give 2 quick answers there. On the first question, I don't think there is necessarily a plan at the moment to kind of have someone from central government here. We might be better off not. And the short answer to the second one is no. It's a very recent power since 2014, and obviously not all local authorities have even been through a change of chief executive in that time, so it's not a power that we have seen used. I think councillors would need very strong justification for doing it.
Limerick appointed their CEO within the last few weeks, and there was no
drama.
Negative. Yeah.
Can I expand on that, Bree? Just what does that mean? That mightn't land with people when you say that Limerick have appointed a CEO.
When the 2 councils were merged in 2014, and then when the CEO, who was there for a few years after that, retired, because of the prospect of a directly elected mayor, only an interim CEO was appointed. And in the past few months, there has been an open appointment process. It has gone through all the steps, and then the final step was approval or rejection by the full council. So just because it was so topical, that's why I threw in that within the last few weeks, at their last meeting, the council approved the appointment of the CEO, who happens to be the person that was the interim CEO anyhow. But they didn't want to reject him. Yeah.
Even though the citizens of Limerick in a plebiscite have voted for a directly elected mayor.
Yeah.
That's still with the Houses of Oireachtas and hasn't moved.
Yeah.
Yes, but you'd still have a chief executive, but with somewhat diminished powers, as far as we know, when the Limerick thing plays out.
That he would have a different title from CEO, and there's a chapter in the Limerick report about what that relationship might look like.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Dr. Quinn. Just on the point about central government getting somebody to speak to us, just remind ourselves we are independent of central government. You're a tin old Saronach, free citizens, but we are conscious of getting a current political opinion in the room here to debate the questions that you're asking about local governance, etc., and what can be devolved. So we are working on that for the June session. Thank you. So we have, we're now into overtime. Last question, number 7, please.
Thank you very, very much. My name is Deirdre Donnelly, and I'm a councillor with Dún Laoghaire County Council. Just yesterday, Andy, I think, made a very, very interesting presentation, as did the other two mayors in the afternoon. And one of the issues he brought up was keeping people on board with the different councils around the Manchester area, the Greater Manchester area, and setting up basically what would be a cabinet and giving them all, letting all the mayors get involved. How would that work here when we elect our mayors every year? They're only here for 1 year. The 4 people we met yesterday in the morning, in a few weeks' time, will chair their last council meeting, and then there'll be a general election within the 4 councils over the next few weeks for a new mayor for the coming year. So how would that work if you had a cabinet changing every year? And the other issue as well, it relates to some of the discussion about making one great super authority and the abolition of the 4 councils. And that would, at the moment, if that were to happen, lead to 183 councillors. Letty McCarthy, again, from Dún Laoghaire, the mayor who was here yesterday, did mention, what would happen there. We all know our own areas. I don't know what's happening in Fingal. Someone in Fingal would not be too well versed maybe on roads in Clondalkin or in Churchtown. So how do you, first of all, have councillors voting on particular issues way outside the area that they'd have been used to up to now? And secondly, councillors meet once a month. There's an official council meeting. The Dáil with 160 members meets a few times a week. So how would any business get done? They're the two questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. They're good questions. I think on the first one, it once again would be in your remit if you were to say that Dublin was to get a directly elected regional mayor, working with the 4 existing local authorities. You could recommend that the 4 mayors under the existing system should have a 5-year term of office. So, you know, that is up for grabs as well. I think with the idea, and it was just floated obviously, of, we'd say, a combined local authority. Simple mathematics would say in the 4 councils you added up to 183. That doesn't mean you have to have 183. It could be more streamlined than that. And again, it would depend if you have a more municipal tier underneath. And again, of course, coming back to how often the local authority meets, that's not cast in stone. You know, Cork City Council has 2 full public meetings a month, so does Cork County Council. So that's all subject to change as well. Just because it's 1 meeting a month now doesn't mean that that's the way it has to be.
Okay, well, that concludes thanks for that, Dr. Quilliman. That concludes the first part of the morning session. We'll now break for coffee. We'll be back at 11:15. And Dr. Sean O'Riordan, who will further expand on this topic this morning on high-level options for the type of direct elected mayor and local government structures that are best suited for Dublin. Thank you. We'll see you in very shortly at 11:15. Goodbye to everybody online.
Yeah.
Was off the wall, like, wasn't it? Paul was off the wall again. Betting, and then, oh, you're killing us, you're killing us.
That's just for you, yeah?
Cupcakes.
Hey folks. Am I coming through clearly there?
No, is it? Hi, Sean, can you hear me now? Good stuff. Yeah, we can hear you.
He's not coming out here now.
Yeah, he's on the wrong.
Yeah, so he's on just no, that one there.
That one,
yeah. Can you try 1, 2, 3 again?
Sean, can you do 1, 2, 3?
1, 2, 3.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
Did you get that? Did you get that okay? Try it one more time, Sean.
So can you go again, Sean?
Or would you prefer the fields of Athenry?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Super.
Cheers.
And you look after whatever.
Yes, yeah, perfect.
So you're okay. Do you want to spotlight them as the main screen?
Yes.
Have the lads come in?
No, they haven't
give
yet.
them an invite?
I
No?
did.
Okay,
I did.
I'll check with.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thanks.
We'll check with that, Carl.
Okay. yes. So, Sean, we're all good to go. I think we're probably just 5 minutes behind schedule, so we'll
That's
probably
grand,
be
Colin.
live.
If you want to grab
for
yourself a
10
coffee, I have my coffee here, so work away.
Great. What are you seeing at the moment? Are you just seeing one? Are you just seeing me? Is that all?
I'm just seeing you, yeah.
Ah, okay. So I think there may be a way to allow you to see the room, but I'd have to wait for the techies to come back.
Yeah, that's no problem.
I think we're good. Yeah. So, Sean, you're missing out on all the cakes. There's very fancy cakes. Wait till I show you. Hold on now. I don't know if you can see this, but look.
Do I look like I need fancy
And welcome back to Dublin, to Malahide, and the second part of our morning's presentation. Welcoming those online again to join with us this morning. We are now moving to a presentation by Dr. Sean O'Riordan, who we had with us yesterday, and very honoured to have Sean with us again this morning. Sean's presentation for the Assembly members, you have a printout of Sean's presentation on your tables. So we'll keep Sean on the big screen, and you can refer to your presentation notes as Sean moves through his presentation. We'll then immediately follow up with our Q&A session immediately after Sean's presentation. Over to you, Dr. O'Riordan. Please give me a round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So rather than going through slavishly on a Sunday morning, my presentation, I'm just going to focus in on a number of key points coming out of yesterday's session and reflections indeed on yesterday's session, and hopefully pointers that might help you in your work over the next number of months. I think it was interesting to see the response of the international representatives yesterday to the Citizens' Assembly, and it's something I can bear out in my international work as commissioning editor for the Local Government Information Unit, that there are a huge number of chief execs, mayors and senior politicians right across the globe who are intrigued, certainly from the feedback I and my colleagues on the research team have been getting, to the initiative that's been undertaken through yourselves. And I'm also around long enough in Ireland to have been at the start of the breakup of the old Dublin County Council into the three county authorities that we now have, and coming forward from that through various iterations of reform right up to and including 2014. And I can frankly say that if somebody had said to me that there would be a political willingness at national level, and this is a very important point because some of you raised this, that there would be a political willingness at national level to ask citizens of Dublin to reflect upon what would be the best form of governance for the city and city region, and what possible role might be played by a democratically elected mayor. If you had asked me that 5 years ago, I would have thought it completely impossible. So I think the fact that you're meeting and existing and engaging in great depth from yesterday's observations on the issues suggests that there's a willingness politically at national level to advance this process and to advance it successfully. And for that reason, I'm particularly hopeful, because it certainly wouldn't have happened in previous iterations of reform that I was involved in here in Ireland, and indeed in other parts of the globe. Now, in saying all of that, the coming through from yesterday's feedback as an observer, I think there's a few important points to establish, if you like. And the first point that I would make is that there are many, many models, and we highlighted a number of the key models yesterday. We got extraordinary inputs from the elected representatives as mayors of Dublin City and the three surrounding counties. And we got equally impressive presentations by any standards from the international representatives. And what really struck me about yesterday was the fact that there was such a commonality of perspective coming through from all of them. And I think as a consequence, there's much to be learned and much to be gained by listening from those different perspectives. So models can either be generally urban or regional. It is quite normal to expect tension between the national and the local, and indeed between the local authorities or the regional assembly and the democratically elected mayor. It's a political system, so you would have to expect that. What is critical, however, is that we have the means by which those conflicts and arguments can be worked through. That is a key feature of every successful model of city governance across the globe. If they don't exist, where there's a dialogue between national, local, you will generally find the process becomes consumed by conflict as distinct from people working together to a common purpose. Alongside that is the idea that citizen engagement is absolutely critical. You are an absolute manifestation of that at the moment. but there's got to be a continuing role for engagement between the directly elected mayor and citizens in whatever format that mayoral role takes over the future years. Again, it's a common theme that we find coming through from the different successive systems of city mayor, executive mayor, democratically elected mayor models, again, across the globe. A further key point, and highlighted again this morning from some of your questions, is the issue about resolving financial relationships. And the point was made that local authorities in Ireland have tended not to be proactive when it came to borrowing funds for the investment locally because of the arrangements at national level. Now, that actually has changed quite dramatically in the last number of years. But the same rules effectively apply to local government in Ireland as apply to local government in Nordic states, because they're governed by the rules of economic and monetary union. So that the same types of controls on the amount of borrowing that's undertaken by local government in the Nordic countries apply to what happens in Ireland. The difference is, of course, is that because they have much wider ranges of responsibilities and functions, they have, in volume terms, a greater capacity to borrow money. But at least in more recent years, in terms of capital investment, that is now the case in Ireland. Indeed, Breed mentioned that Limerick City and County Council is in receipt of borrowing funding to support the regeneration of the Opera Centre from the European Investment Bank and the Council of Europe Bank. In all instances, there's a continuing role, a critical continuing role for the local elected representatives. Going back to the Helsinki model, where they actually have their executive councillors, but a far bigger, wider body of what are styled as leisure time councillors. And what I mean by that is people who in their spare time are elected representatives representing their own immediate community, and how important that is to the overall policy development that takes place at the local authority level. So in the same way that successful models have very strong public participation structures in place, equally important is a very strong relationship between the local elected body and the mayor, whether that's at local or indeed regional level. And finally, in terms of resourcing the mayor, again, a point that was raised yesterday by several of the members of the Assembly, most mayoral systems will have their own staff supporting them, as well as having the wider administration and professional bodies of staff that support the delivery of services. So, the idea of a mayor going in with a personal assistant or whatever tends not to work. They do need to have access to levels of expertise and levels of knowledge that might necessarily be within their own authority, and they can bring them in. And that, again, is a common theme throughout the different systems that we see globally. So where does that bring us? I was really intrigued by the extent to which people were coming forward with different models, and even this morning, can we do this or can we do that? And I think, the terms of reference that have been given to the Assembly are exceptionally open, and it's therefore within your role, and the Chair, I think, has emphasised this several times, even this morning. It is up to you as the Assembly members for Dublin, representing the people of Dublin, to take a view on the range and extent and scope of an incoming mayoral structure and the supporting regimes behind that. But there are different examples, obviously, which we talked about. And I suppose in a broad sense, coming through from the conversations yesterday, they do boil down into a number of key potential options or variations in options as well. I wouldn't necessarily just restrict myself to what I've set out for my interpretation on the PowerPoint in front of you. So, are you going to go for a model that is about having a democratically elected mayor for the Dublin region, supported by an Assembly, which is kind of partially reflecting what happens in London and in Paris, whilst retaining the existing 4 local authorities and building relationships there? Are the 4 existing authorities, do we keep those 4 existing authorities allow them to have their own democratically elected mayor, but again under the umbrella of a Dublin-wide democratically elected mayor. Again, that in part sort of reflects some of the processes in places like Paris and elsewhere. You could partially look at the model that has applied to Cork in recent years, where Cork City has expanded its area quite substantially, but essentially kept the same management and electoral process in place with the manager and council relationship, albeit given the government decision to replace the Lord Mayor, if you like, with a democratically elected mayor, and have smaller structures. So in the way that Cork County was reduced as Cork City was increased, might be a potential model. And then the option there, of course, is to have democratically elected mayors in those existing and remaining smaller authorities as well. The other option that's been touched on it would be to actually just abolish the entire system as we now know it, replace a Dublin-wide regional assembly with a democratically elected mayor, but critically, and I do say this critically, underpinned by local metropolitan structures. Auckland went through a model of moving towards a major regional structure, and it didn't work. And it didn't work because there was such a gap between the wider regional role of the mayor and the assembly, the council, the regional council structure. So they ended up having to create boards across the city region to allow for the local democratic voice to come into play. Now, in a way, that might be quite a feasible option to think in terms of, because whether people realise it or not, in fact, the 4 Dublin authorities do operate a lot of their services on an area basis anyway. So, for example, here in Malahide, where we all are this morning, a lot of the day-to-day work of Fingal County Council is undertaken on its behalf by the Malahide Howth Area Committee, which is made up of the elected representatives of that area. So it allows them, come back to what has been said yesterday by the mayors, a very real focus on the immediacy of service delivery, whilst allowing for the wider structure. The one thing I would absolutely caution against is abolishing the lower tier structures, the 4 authorities, and not replacing them with other local structures. It hasn't worked where it has been attempted, where it was being proposed in places like Perth and Melbourne, and indeed in other parts of the Southern Hemisphere. The people withdrew from it when they saw the impact that it was having initially on Auckland and the ineffectiveness of service delivery coming through from the Auckland City authorities. So it seems to me that that's not an option. And there's frankly a reason for us talking about Manchester and not talking about Birmingham, because Birmingham has gone down that model as distinct from the Manchester model. And it has been a very difficult transition, to say the least. But ultimately, those are just options. And I'd also have an eye to what has been done in Limerick by the implementation group, where in a sense, they've created, excuse the term because everybody's using it these days, a hybrid model, which is about having the democratically elected mayor supported by the City and County Council of Limerick, having a range of responsibilities shared between it and the incoming Director General, but also having, for government, a suite of services that potentially could over time migrate into that role over time, so that the emphasis is on getting the people in place, getting the immediate structure up and running, getting the shift in the balance between the relationship of the mayor and the Director General / Chief Executive and the centre, operating within an agreed programme for Limerick that is agreed between the mayor's office, the Director General, Chief Exec, and central government. And in doing so, creating a certainty about what the mayor can do, what the resources that might be made available to make those things happen. And alongside that, a longer term view about how more services and more responsibilities might be migrated back into the local authority umbrella under the leadership of the directly elected mayor. So I think that's something that is well worth looking at in the context of the model that ultimately you might put forward as a citizens' assembly for Dublin. Fundamentally, it's your choice, and it's a choice that I am highly envious of as somebody who's worked on local government reforms across the globe for a long time, to have a body of citizens of all voices representing all the diversity of the great city region of Dublin coming together and focusing in on a pattern of change that is going to take this great area, this great place of the world, and take it forward. I think it's a tremendous opportunity, and I absolutely wish you the very, very best, both as a citizen of Dublin, but also as a person who's been involved in local government reforms across the globe for many, many years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. O'Riordan, for that presentation. That really is a capstone presentation for the last two sessions that we've had, and for this weekend. And Dr. O'Riordan has concluded by giving us a number of a variation of options that we can pick and mix from. And if you look over to predominantly on your right-hand side, towards Conor, our cameraman, you'll see on a trolley, you'll see some sweets and some lots of different types of toys. And if you had a couple of cents in your pocket, you could go there and you could pick and mix. And now that is as Dr. O'Riordan said, and I quote, fundamentally it is your choice, and absolutely it's your choice. And it's your choice to pick and mix. And we have an assembly. We're trying to build a high-performing horse. We don't want to build a camel. We want to design something that's going to work for Dublin. And we're now going to open the floor up to probe some of those questions on the presentation about high-level options for a directly elected mayor and local government structures. So for the next 35 minutes, it's over to you. The floor is open. Questions for Dr. O'Riordan and for the EAG in the top table. So we're going to start with table 11, please. Brian.
Thank you. How are you doing? I'm Brian. You've given us some structural models. Could we also get some funding models? Because that seems to be a major issue for what's going on at the moment, that even if it was a simple thing of just changing the funding structure that we have at the moment, the system we have at the moment would be better. So if we could see some different options for funding as well as structures, please.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So one of our takeaways is to discuss with the EAG and come back with a number of organisational structures, but we'll also include, as you requested, Brian, a funding model. Any response to that, Sean? Any immediate answer?
It's surprising, actually, how common the types of funding that the local authority systems right across the globe have. So, they'll generally raise local property taxes, they'll generally have commercial charges, they'll generally have some levels of subsidy from the National Exchequer, and they'll generally have regulatory fees and other incomes that are created from their day-to-day activities. What is different about Ireland? It's shocking in a way. If we were to look at the amount of resources that local authorities have to put in to having staff filling out individual application forms for individual funds, to do individual projects, to go back to national government, this is absolutely unique in the OECD. In the OECD, most local authorities, when they're getting grants from Central Exchequer, they are block grants, and there's a degree of independence in how those block grants are spent, having regard to the overall contract between the local authority and the national or regional body. I, off the top of my head, I would think there's not far short of about 500 different funds, ranging from €50 up to €50 million, that local authorities in Ireland have to spend their time filling forms in for, in order to to deliver the services that are required. So at one level, there's a commonality in terms of the types of monies that are available, but at another level, it's the extent to which local authorities have the independence to determine the priorities for spending, priorities which in Ireland are generally driven by national priorities because of the nature of the individual funds that are being given to them.
Thanks for that, Dr. Reardon. Table 3, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to get your opinion on whether or not the regional authorities would be of any benefit to bring back with the directly elected mayor at the head of them, with the existing mayors being deputy mayors. They'd handle the day-to-day running bread and butter issues, ribbon cuttings and all that. And then 3 or 4 big ticket items would be for the mayor, like transportation. And for example, I think it was one of the speakers yesterday said, we can provide bus lanes from local authorities, but we can't put buses on them. And that could be statutorily obliged to negotiate with the mayor. So I would just say, you know, I would, how would I put it? I would prefer that there would be small ticket, big ticket items, but small amount of them initially, and get them right, and then from then on add on extra responsibilities. Just see what you thought of that idea.
Yeah, I have to say I think that's a very solid idea by any standards. If a number of important wins on issues like transport could be generated, it would reinforce the role of having the mayor and having that level of democratic accountability at local and regional level that is absent at the moment. People may wonder why the mayor of Bristol, who is actually a very good mayor, by the way, and it's a shame that the system has worked against him. That why is it being abolished in 2024? And as they pointed out, he hadn't had the time to establish because some of these projects are actually very long term, and he hadn't been given the freedom to advance them. So for me, it's critical that there's got to be a fairly solid, tangible demonstration that major projects of some sort or other are brought through as a consequence of the rollout of a democratically elected mayor in Dublin, if only to demonstrate to people that this actually makes sense. And the great thing, if you go to Manchester and you go to Birmingham, just physically visit them, and that's something that I've done many, many times with work and for leisure. You know when you're in Manchester how vibrant the city and city region is. You physically see it and feel it. Whereas when you go to Birmingham, it's a totally different experience. It's amazing the difference in the experience. And that reflects the fact that Andy Burnham and his colleagues across the other combined authorities in England and across the various iterations of regional and local democratically elected mayor systems, mainland Europe and elsewhere, you really see the effect of mayors working alongside their partners at local, regional level and indeed at national level, and delivering very, very substantive change on the ground across a range of areas, some of which are bricks and mortar, some of which are less tangible, economic, social and culture.
Do we have any further questions? Again, back to table 3, please.
Malcolm Stewart. A very simple question, but is there a model that... sorry? Oh. Is there a model that this man can show us which involves very significant devolution of powers from central government to local government, very significant accountability for a DEM to the people, and where is that? Does it exist, and can you just point us to it?
It does exist, and it's the common feature of mayoral government across most parts of the globe. So if you take the examples of the 3 cities that we had yesterday afternoon, what we have seen over the years, particularly for Paris and also Manchester, and increasingly also for Boston, is a gradual migration of responsibilities from the state authorities like Massachusetts State Authority, or in the case of England, Whitehall, and indeed Paris, central government, the central government based in Paris, devolving responsibilities to the city region. So these are now quite a common feature, and if anything, have gained momentum over the last decade. So it's increasingly the case that we see democratically elected mayoral structures in place increasingly across the globe. And while some of them may have started out with essentially initial bully pulpit influence, like the likes of Maragall in Barcelona, they have moved and migrated over time, because what state authorities and regional authorities in other countries, and I have to say increasingly is my view here in Ireland, are waking up to, is just how excellent local authorities are in actually getting things done relative to other parts of the public service. It's no coincidence that thinking in cultural terms has shifted so dramatically in the Irish case over the last decade because of the success of local government in advancing culture regeneration, economic renewal, coming out of austerity, demonstrating the fact that if you have people on the ground working closely together and working with other state agencies and state authorities, it is frankly amazing what you can actually achieve. And Ireland is an example of that. But indeed, many other mayoral systems across the globe are equally strong examples. So I'd have no hesitation in recommending any one of the ones I spoke about yesterday, and indeed others, that have been at the heart of economic renewal and regeneration, among other things.
Before we go to table 11, EAG, any comments?
Just maybe a quick comment, if you don't mind, Chairman. I think we had some examples internationally yesterday. Sean has mentioned that there are a lot of models out there, and I would say there are and there aren't. There are not hundreds of models either. They're nearly all variations of a theme. So I think even in the 4 that kind of Sean has mentioned there in the pick and mix slide, they cover a lot, and obviously you have freedom to mix and match, go in different directions as well. But I think don't be worried that you're missing some great global example. Most things are covered within these kind of 4 pieces, and I think we're heading into more difficult territory. This is kind of where you earn your meals. But you're well able to do that. And what today is, when you get into your roundtables, is an initial dipping of your toes into the water. No one is expecting outcomes today. It's just to try and put some frame on what we're doing, and Sean has helped us with that very much, I think.
So on to table 11, then 8.
Francis, I'm just wondering if it would be possible for the Assembly that if we picked an area for the Mayor to begin with, for example, transport, if it would be possible for us to stipulate that the functions and budget and responsibility would gradually pass to the Mayor's office. So, for example, the budget 25% the first 2 years, then 50%, then 75%. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact, but would that be workable?
I might just ask, I'll make a comment before bringing Sean in. You can propose what you'd like once there's a consensus around it. That's the first thing I'd say. Sean?
Yeah, exactly, Jim. I think there might even be an expectation that that's what you would do from the point of view of those that are watching the Assembly and its work. And I think what you're suggesting, Francis, is no more than the earlier suggestion, is common sense. So I would encourage you. Let me just, I've been involved in local government reform, particularly in Ireland, for going on over 30 years now at this stage. And one particular reform that occurred as part of the 2014 reforms was to take what was an already existing local service operating alongside the local authorities and embed it back into local government, where it probably should have been from the very beginning. And it, I think, involved about 70 staff transferring. But the effort it took across 3 government departments, the local government system, the City and County Management Association, the trade unions, to make that happen. Now, it did happen eventually, and it's been hugely successful, by the way. And everybody's saying, why didn't we do it before this? But it took about 3 years for that to happen. And that's just one specific area. These things can be very difficult to advance because people are worried, people have concerns, worried about their positions, and so on. So I think taking something really, really tangible and creating that idea of gradually beginning to transfer responsibility across to the Mayor's office is a very, very solid idea.
Professor Breen?
Yeah, I think Sean is spot on. I think it's a very good idea to have sort of a schedule of powers and finances to be transferred. And it also gives you the option that you actually have something in writing. This is what we expect by 2026, 28, 30, 32, 34. And that it's a roadmap for change. And I think that would be a very useful way to think about it, that it's graduated, it's structured. You have an it can be reviewed on an ongoing basis, but that actually you have actually laid down what you want to see over a very particular period, and the expectation then is that's met by government departments.
I also think that might make for a case study, that transport as a case study of what that might look like for one of the sessions, even for 15 minutes. We're on to table number 8, then 9.
Hello, my name is Shane. Just a question on the Assembly. We're hearing a lot about the Regional Assembly. What other functions besides scrutiny and holding the Mayor to account could be incorporated there? Obviously, it's up to us to decide what it is, but it'd be good to hear about what other functions such an Assembly might have aside from scrutiny of the Mayor.
Sean, could you answer that first?
I think the Assembly gives you the opportunity, and again, this is something been used by other mayoral systems, to think strategically and critically beyond the horizon. One of the real difficulties confronting political leaderships across the globe, and equally so here in Ireland, and indeed their supporting administrative and professional regimes, is they're so caught up in the day-to-day and dealing with, things that weren't even happening 2 months ago in the case of Ukraine, for example, that are now very much at the heart of what government across the globe is trying to cope with. So the opportunity to think beyond the box, using the wealth of experience from amongst such an assembly, from the citizens of the area, going back to the example from Paris, and using that to look forward and think about where we're going as a city region over 10, 15, 100 years would be, for me, a really important point, because it's something we haven't been particularly good at in Ireland. And we suffer the consequences, I think, in a lot of the legacies and gaps that we have in meeting people's needs, particularly people-centred service needs. Because we're trying to deal with the immediate rather than the strategically important. And housing is a classic example of that. We knew 25 years ago we were going to have major housing problems in this era because we were having major problems with providing classrooms for our primary children 25 years ago. And nobody had the capacity to think forward. What does that mean for us in 25 years' time? And how do we create investment programs to meet those needs as they're going to arise? So I think for me, Shane, that would be a really important piece of work to be done, above and beyond the scrutiny that you would expect of an assembly of that type.
Thanks, Dr. Reardon. Thinking strategically is a really key part and a very, very well met point. EAG, any further comments on what an assembly could do?
Not specifically, other than the idea that obviously some of the assembly members could form this type of cabinet and have a specific functional remit themselves. So I think that could be an option, and it was something that was mentioned yesterday.
Thank you. 8 minutes to go. Table 9.
Hi. Yeah. I think I just comment and a question, because we're talking on models, and obviously the better the model, the better that will be. I think Andy Burnham said yesterday about I think he was referencing the point about better to have a good plan today than a perfect plan tomorrow. But obviously we try to do the best we can and put the best model in place. But just to quote a couple of proverbs, one is that if people are prosperous, even a leaderless state can be managed. And leaders of a state should make sure all their citizens dine first and then they dine on the leftovers. So I'm just wondering that, you know, a key effort of any mayor should really be economic development, because the more you develop economically, the more prosperous people become, the more you deal with issues like antisocial behavior and all those kind of things. So that's more or less just a comment. My question is directly to you, Jim. You've used the word consensus about, I think, 3 times this morning in answers to different questions. What constitutes consensus? Are we talking simple majority? Are we talking, you know, 75%, 2/3, 100%? Just curious what you meant by consensus.
My understanding it's a simple majority, but I will defer to the Secretary General to just to back that up or to have a different perspective.
Thanks for that, Chairman. Yeah, I get all the easy ones. Yeah, I mean, a simple majority is normally enough for a recommendation. The only thing I would say, though, I mean, if not unlike something like the Brexit thing where it's 51-49, I think we would have to reflect that in the report, and government might take that into account as well, just the size of it. So the results of the ballots, every individual ballot on every individual question will be published and made available under our transparency rules, so people can interpret the weight of the recommendation themselves by the size of the majority.
And finally, just to put a capstone on that, again, I refer to the terms of reference. The terms of reference of the Dublin City Assembly are as follows, and I quote, third last bullet, determine all issues by a majority of the votes of members present and voting, other than the chairperson who will have the casting vote in the case of an equality of votes. End of quote. Does that clarify it, Paul?
Questions I've asked, and it just tells me that I need to read the terms of reference a little bit more.
No,
in fact, I should learn them off by heart.
That's all. Thanks, Paul. And Breed.
Just a quick point in response to your suggestion about economic development. I'm going to say it's quite a timely one because, as we said in the first gathering, it's only since 2014 that local authorities have had responsibility for economic development. So they're finding their way and, you know, working out the best strategies. So it's a good time to think of maybe linking, or a possibility of linking it in.
Before we go back to table 9 for a question, just to finish that off, Paul, we take it as a compliment that you're asking us questions to clarify. We want to create that safe space where you can put your hand up, and it's a really, really important question you asked, so thanks for asking it. On to John,
Can I just
please. Table 9.
make a point there, Jim, as well, just on economic development. In a previous role, I was a corporate advisor for a number of foreign direct investment sector companies based in the States and in Japan. And the number of times I had to explain to senior potential investors who might be looking at Ireland and looking at other areas that they might be looking to invest in before they go to the IDAs of the world, because these companies don't just roll up to the IDA and say, hey, we have $1 billion to spend. They do their homework before they meet up with the likes of the IDA, excellent as they are in their job. But the number of times I've had to explain to senior company officials in various companies that are looking at Ireland as a potential investment point, that it's more important for them at the moment to meet the chief executive of the local authority than the mayor, is extraordinary. It's almost a common theme anytime I'm brought in by such companies, because the expectation, because it happens in their own countries or in the countries they've already invested in, is that they will be dealing with the mayor's office. And it's almost why are we meeting a mere official? We need to be meeting the senior political leader here. And no, it doesn't work like that in Ireland. So just, as I say, a little bit of a story behind the different international interpretations of who it is you should deal with when it comes to investing economically in a country like Ireland.
We'll also put on Paul on the website or the library for the Assembly members. There's a report strategic report published by the Dublin Chamber of Commerce, who advocating the position that you mentioned about the economic benefit of having a directly elected mayor. So it's a point that Dr. Reardon has just made there. So thank you. Now back to table 9 with John, with 3 minutes to go.
Thanks, Sean, for the presentation. Just a quick question and a comment. Just the regional assembly, would you envisage that being a directly elected regional assembly or one appointed from councillors? I know the Eastern Midlands Regional Assembly at the moment isn't, obviously it's purely consultative, but it isn't directly elected. And secondly, just on the fourth point about the idea of abolishing the 4 local authorities and having networked metropolitan councils, I think you mentioned the Howth Malahide Area Committee. I suppose there's a number of area committees that wouldn't necessarily lend themselves to becoming town councils or metropolitan councils. And I'll just give the example of one also fairly close to us in Fingal, which is there's an area committee that takes in most of North Dublin, so Swords, Balbriggan, Lusk, Rush and Skerries, and obviously Swords and Lusk or Swords and Skerries have quite different interests. Even Dublin 15, there's significant differences, say, between Blanchetown or Ongar, which is on the Meath boundary. So just to take that into account, that if something like that was being done, area committee areas would probably have to be reconstructed. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I was just instancing it as an example that, in fact, there is something there to start working with, but it has to have a resonance in terms of local identity and the connection between the elected body and the local community. So these are critical aspects, but it is interesting nonetheless that the local authorities in Dublin and indeed generally across the country with municipal districts, as Breed was talking about earlier, are progressively building up a relationship that is very, very locally based and is seeing the migration of services at a very, very local level in a way that mightn't necessarily have been envisaged in the short term when the 2014 reforms were being proposed. On the question of directly elected assembly members, I'm quite open. My own personal preference, for what it's worth, is that these are democratic bodies and therefore would probably ideally be elected, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be. The fact that people can be nominated from the local structures in Paris and in Manchester suggests that there is that democratic platform anyway, in the absence of a direct election into the regional structure. So I would think, again, for yourselves to reflect on that and to come back with what you think is the best option.
Well, that concludes the session. Dr. Sean Reardon, thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to be with us yesterday and again this morning on a Sunday morning. Could you please, everyone, express your gratitude to Dr. Sean Reardon. And indeed to our EAG, thanks again for joining us. Just one point of clarification. We were asked if we had any examples of organisational charts from some of the presentations that we got yesterday. So we just put on the table there just an example of the Manchester Greater Region directly elected mayor organisation chart, and also one for Helsinki. But we are committed to come back to you with more examples, and we'll format them in the same type. So we don't want to influence you either way. We just want to give you the evidence, give you the data, and then you make that decision. And as Dr. A. Quinlanson said, now we're going to go into a a roundtable, closed session, private session. So I would encourage you, maybe not to dip your toe, but if you feel comfortable and confident, just jump right in there and have fun. So we want to say goodbye to those online. You can join us again at 12:50. So goodbye to everybody online, and over to the facilitators for a round table discussion up to 12:40. Thank you. We'll be going live in 30 seconds. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back live to the Dublin Citizens Assembly in North County Dublin in beautiful Malahide. We're starting at 55. I was asked to give another 5 minutes to allow the full completion of the survey. So thank you for doing that. It's a really important part of the deliberative democracy process, and I just want to congratulate you on embracing that process over this weekend, and indeed our first weekend. When we talk about openness, fairness, respect, efficiency, collegiality, creating that psychological safety, and equality of voice amongst the members, it was great to see that everybody's opinions were respected and that you felt safe to express them. We had a remarkable 32 individual, different assembly members posing questions and contributions, and a lot of new voices we heard for the first time this weekend. That's really, it's remarkable, it's special, and just give yourselves a round of applause for being respectful to each other. I'd like to start off by saying a few thank yous, in no particular order. But I'd like to thank the MD, Matthew Ryan, and his team at the Grand Hotel for, again, their hospitality and their care for this Citizens Assembly. I'd like to thank Carol Gardner and Quality Matters for Carol, for your and your teams, your facilitation, your note-taking. It's a critical part of the deliberative democracy process that the Assembly is facilitated from at a local level at each table. And you've done Carol and your team have done a phenomenal job. So on behalf of myself, Art, and indeed the Assembly members, can you give Carol and the team a big round of applause? Thanks, Caroline. I've seen my first TikTok for the Assembly. I don't have an account, so it sounds like I need to get one to communicate with everybody. So to Conor and the PI Communications team, for the live streaming to Jerry, to Niall on the sound. There were some real challenges yesterday with the Zoom. You might not notice it, but Cathal was and the team were working right up to the hard stop of going live, and they were absolutely brilliant. So big part of the democracy is engaging with the outside world. So thanks to Conor, to PI Communications, and the rest of the team. Thank you. Ronan and Lorna for that TikTok from Q4. Thanks for making sure that we hit the headlines this weekend. There was we had the national broadcaster RTE here. DG Carr were here yesterday, as you're aware. That's really important. We were on some of the broadsheets yesterday as well, and indeed social media. So thanks to Ronan and Lorraine, to our Irish Sign Language interpreters, to Lisa and to Darren. Again, you're doing a phenomenal job, and indeed a heroic effort to keep up with John Cummins yesterday, our poet. So that was really impressive. So well done. To our expert advisory group, to Dr. Jane Suter for keeping us all in check and keeping me in check in terms of making sure we're embracing the deliberative democracy process. keeping on schedule, keeping to the terms of reference, and indeed to our EAG, to Dr. Breed Quinn, to Dr. A. Quinlivan and Professor Derek O'Brien, and indeed to all our guest speakers. We had a phenomenal range of subjects and topics and expertise. And thanks for giving your time this weekend. So, Bula Bus. Finally, to our Secretariat, to Carl, Tim, Lorraine, Connor, Denise, Deirdre, and joining us this weekend, Julianne, and indeed to our Secretary General, Art O'Leary, for a phenomenal job. This wouldn't happen without them, so big round of applause. There's no need to blush, Art. Well done. Thank you very much. Thanks. He's done a great job to keep me in check, so I really appreciate his counsel and his guidance. Just we have a few things to follow up upon for you over the course of the week. We're going to now begin to consider the program for our third week. We've already started into that, but follow-ups from this week will be the organisational charts. We are going to launch tomorrow. Please thanks for your patience with us. We said we'd have it done this weekend. It is done. I've had a look at it with Cathal. Just want to do some more proofing of it before we launch it to the Assembly members. But it's a great initiative. It'll be on our online portal for you, for the members, for the papers, your presentations, the reading list, the vox pops that we saw. We'll even give you a link. We were asked last night to John Cummins and some of his poetry. We'll link that as well. So just thanks for your patience, and Cathal and the team will email you individually your login code and your details. But anyway, that's at a very high level. You have the members at citizensassembly.ie, and again, for your membership, for any ideas you might have for us for the future, please do engage with us and send them to members at citizensassembly.ie. So, to conclude, we're on this journey of climbing Dublin Mountain. We've gone through session 1, we've gone through session 2, how do we do it, how others do it, and the possible options. And I thought you've really embraced those concepts over the last 2 sessions, and you've come a long way in such a short space of time. Remember, the presenters, the experts, they've conducted PhDs and doctorates in this area, and they're experts in their field. They live and breathe local democracy and how local authorities work, and directly Lord Mayors, and all the things that myself and you are learning about for the very first time. And so don't be too hard on yourselves. When you hear the voice and everybody talking, that's deliberative democracy in progress. And when you walk the room and listen to the questions that are being asked, and there's probably fewer questions being asked, which might, I don't think you're shy, that's one thing you're not. So it probably means that there's a simulation of learning. And I think you've done remarkably well, as I have, to try and understand what's going on. It's a challenging topic. So well done. And I think that when we meet again, there will be, as you reflect and read the reference material, we'll have a really powerful session. We've a bit of time now, a bit of space until we meet again in June. So I say to each and every one of you, congratulations. You're doing really, really well, and keep it up, because next session, when we meet, we need to begin to consider like what should or could it look like, and in a very, very meaningful way. We're going to have a presentation from Tim O'Connor, who was the chair of the Limerick Implementation Group, and we want to find out the lessons that group would have learned, and with their deliberative democracy process, and what can we take away from that. But the nub of it all is to get to through June. We'll break for the summer recess, and we do need to come back to you with those dates for the 3rd and 10th of September. And then we'll narrow down and debate our options, agree the ballot papers, and then come again in October, vote to present the paper to our Houses of Oireachtas in November, by the close of November. So you can all relax over the festive season and Christmas, which isn't too far around the corner, dare I say. Well, we were asked to think strategically, so we're looking at the horizon. It's not that far away. So we're moving through our timetable. We're on track, which is great. We're meeting our objectives in each of the sessions, which is all down to you. We don't have to repeat any lectures or any exams when we meet again. So well done again. I'd like to wish you all a nice weekend, and thank you once again for committing to your time and your energy to our great city and county of Dublin. The work that you're going to do is transformational. We've heard often enough over the last week, 2 days that your work will have not a significant but a huge impact on the lives of not only the citizens of Dublin city and county, but broader than that in terms of the direction of travel for our great capital city. So well done. Have a lovely weekend. Enjoy your family and friends, and we'll see you all back again in late June. Thank you. Gurmagat.